What's going on, Dirty Birds? Tori McElhaney here with Terrin Waack and Will McFadden. Will and I switched seats today.
And she got the names right.
And I got the names right. Didn't
no
mix
more
them
Torin.
up. No more Torin and Terry or whatever.
Yep.
Will.
You got it right.
Right. Okay, so I got it right. We're off to a good start.
You got it wrong. You got it right wrong.
Exactly.
Is it Till or Warren? What would be the better one for us?
I like Till. I like Till.
Okay.
Yeah, Warren is a little hard.
I'm my own person. Leave Terrin alone.
All right, so we are coming to you on, it's Thursday right now, Thursday afternoon. That you'll hear this on probably Friday morning, if I had to guess, according to how long it takes Will to edit the podcast. Shout out producer Will. And this has been quite literally one of the crazier weeks that the Falcons have had in a long time. And I, for one, have been covering this team since 2020. I have seen some crazy weeks, and this one has gotten the National Football League talking because the Falcons made the decision after beating the Raiders 15-9 on Monday Night Football, made the decision on Tuesday late evening into the night that they would be replacing Kirk Cousins as the starting quarterback for the number 8 overall draft pick, Michael Penix Jr. Now, we have had many conversations about this. If you haven't seen, Will and I sat down pretty immediately after the news broke the next morning to kind of just go over how the Falcons got here, what we thought about it. But we've had a little bit more time to hear from Raheem Morris, Zach Robinson, Kirk Cousins, and Michael Penix themselves. I'm curious, and I just want to start with this, you guys. From all of the conversations that we've had the last 24 hours with some of these decision makers and the guys that it directly affects, what was the prevailing thought that you had, or even the most interesting note that you felt like you heard from someone? And Will, I'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. I kind of really wanted to see what Zach Robinson was going to say. Obviously, as the offense coordinator, he's in charge of kind of conducting that whole show, going in with the game plan. And of course, you obviously consult with the quarterback and you want to use what they're comfortable running. But it just felt like, and this is what we touched on, honestly, in a couple of podcasts over the last couple of weeks, is it just felt like the offense was shrinking a little bit with the way that Kirk Cousins was playing. And I think that was very clear on Monday night when you had a game plan that felt very defense focused, special teams focused, and running game focused. And all three of those aspects worked beautifully. And yet you still escaped, honestly, feels like an appropriate word, with a 6-point win against a team that is fighting not for the playoffs, but for the number 1 draft pick. And that is ultimately, I think, part of the reason that the move was made, but it's also part of the reason why I'm very excited to see what this team looks like on Sunday, because yes, Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins are very different quarterbacks, but I just kind of felt like the offense wasn't as open as it could have been. Yeah. There weren't, frankly, like some elements of 2024 NFL offenses that I do think you need to have to be successful in this league.
Yeah.
And I think Michael Penix is going to be able to execute on some of those aspects, play action, rollouts, his mobility. So to hear Zach Robinson kind of say, yes, there are some different aspects of his game that we're excited to tap into that we think we can bring to life in this offense was really what I was hoping to hear and what stood out to me.
So it's interesting too, because to your point, Raheem Morris said immediately after the game that the goal was to kind of like play soccer a little bit, play keep away with the Raiders, just stay one step in front of them the entire time. And then we heard from Zach Robinson, again, to your point, say on Wednesday, yes, he had been tailoring the game plan to specifically lighten the load of Kirk Cousins.
Yep. He
used that word tailoring.
Yes.
And I said this on the show that I do with Kelly Price on Fox 5. Shout out, Raz up tonight. But I said on the show, I was like, it's one thing for Arthur Smith to have had to game plan around Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder. It is something else entirely for Zach Robinson to have to game plan around Kirk Cousins, who you are paying the amount of money that you're paying to him. And that was one of the prevailing things. There's a lot of things that came out yesterday that I thought were prevailing, but that was the one thing that I was like, the Raiders game was the absolute, I think, nail in the proverbial coffin of being like, when you're having to actively game plan to account for someone not being fully themselves, fully capable, fully able, that's when you get into trouble. No matter who they are, no matter what position they play, no matter where they are in the organization or how much money you're giving them, that's the crux of it. So Terrin, I'm curious, what was the prevailing message that you really clung to yesterday when we were talking to these guys?
So I listened to y'all's episode of Falcons Final Whistle and then also the Falcons Audible podcast this morning on my drive up because I was
You're crushing our content. I love this. Number one fan over here.
I think it just says how long the drive is.
Atlanta traffic, yep.
But that's because I wasn't here in the morning, so I didn't get to see Raheem Morris's press conference in person. I had a doctor's appointment. I'm okay. Not that anyone asks. But
everyone's worried in the comments.
First thing I was like, hey,
I said I'm not dying. And
just a level set.
So I wanted to catch up on what I missed. And something that was good to hear in the Audible podcast was Arch saying back in the preseason when he was talking to Penix before the Dolphins game, Penix straight up just said, I'm not nervous. And I think that tracks so much to the Michael Penix Jr. we saw in the press conference yesterday, where he was just super cool, calm, and collected. And I think his even personality, his steady heartbeat, the really slow, steady heartbeat that Zach Robinson mentioned is going to serve really well, that you're getting thrown into this offense late in the season after a veteran and with the playoffs still just a few inches away, that you couldn't have put him in a more pressurized situation. I mean, the only other pressure would be next week on the road.
Right.
But it's still a lot to put on a young quarterback. And here he is just another day in the office. And something he has said since the very beginning is he embraced his role. Because I know he was being questioned about were you watching other rookie quarterbacks this season play? And how did that make you feel? And he's like, I was happy for them. I knew the situation when I arrived in Atlanta. I embraced it and I prepared. So if something did happen, I was ready. And here he is, allegedly ready. I mean, we'll find out on Sunday.
Exactly.
But he seems ready. Mentally, he seems ready. And so I think because of the steadiness of him, there might be a few hiccups here and there, but as long as they get the rust out for the most part in practice this week and in the first quarter, and as soon as he gets really, really comfortable, I think we're able to see what he can do for this offense. And I hope they trust him.
Yeah. I think that was obviously after the pick was made in the draft, a huge talking point was his age. And when people were saying you're going to have a 24-year-old rookie quarterback with a ton of experience sit and learn for how long?
Old.
I always
for
looked
4
at that.
or 5 years is what the prevailing quote was during that time.
Which is crazy. But I always looked at that as, okay, if you need to turn to him sooner rather than later, whether that be injury or the situation the Falcons currently find themselves in, that age is going to become all of a sudden a positive. And the experience that he has at the collegiate level, I do think is going to your point, Terrin, serve him very well because he has played in some of the biggest games. He took it to Texas in the college football playoff and just absolutely balled out. So there is going to be a maturity that I think we will see on Sunday from Michael Penix.
It's interesting too, because I think back to the entire day on Wednesday. And as I alluded to earlier, you have Raheem Morris, Zach Robinson, Kirk Cousins, and Michael Penix all talking on the same day. And I left Wednesday, now put in a 12-and-a-half-hour day, so I was exhausted. So maybe that plays into this. But I left Wednesday feeling as though they all said exactly what they needed to. And what I mean by that is Raheem gets up, it's first thing when everybody gets in, and I felt like he was incredibly candid about the situation in a way that was refreshing. I feel like I've gone into so many press conferences over the years and not had answers to questions being asked. That's always going to be a sticking point to me. And
that was Tuesday.
Right. But I understood at that time because they weren't far enough along because we did not get home until 6:00 in the morning on Monday night into Tuesday.
It was a scheduling thing where it was kind of you got asked the questions before. I think they really had determined an answer.
But I'm just saying the difference between the two was very, very stark. And you're happy to have had the second after
once they knew what they wanted to do, you got the answers.
Yes,
you got
that's it. Yep. That's that.
Exactly. And I felt as though some of the questions that Raheem was asked was, about Kirk specifically. And there was one thing that he said where he kind of broke down the walls a little bit and was like, yes, the reason why this is happening now is because I had a lot of confidence in Kirk Cousins to be able to bounce back. I felt like he was going to right the ship himself. he said before, we owe it to Kirk to allow him the opportunity to get right. He's gotten right in his previous past places when he's gotten knocked down. He's got back up. I wrote a whole story about it. But he was like, and it does surprise me that it didn't happen. And that was something that he was like, it
surprised me.
Right. Frankly. I think it has surprised a lot of people. I don't think anybody truly expected that it was going to be the decline that it was at the rate that it was. And then the follow-up to that was like, do you know why this decline happened? And he literally, without hesitation, was no. And I think that's so fair because that's the exact same question that we all have been asked, that we've been asking. And sometimes it really is as simple as being like, you don't know. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that there is a like psyche part of this conversation about what's going on with Kirk Cousins that not a lot of people are willing to touch or talk about. And I felt like by Raheem Morris saying, no, I don't know what happened. And we're going to try and figure it out. We tried to figure it out. We don't know. Let's see. I felt like was very candid and open. And then I felt like with Zach Robinson, he did a good job of kind of laying the groundwork of like, okay, we had a walkthrough, but we had 70 plays that we ran, and
I love that.
We made we made sure that Michael was throwing every single rep because he needs this connection with these receivers. Because as Raheem Morris said earlier in the day, he hasn't been working with Drake Darnell, Kyle Bajan. He hasn't been throwing the ball to them. Yeah. That's Kirk's job. Until it's not.
He only plays catch with Casey Washington.
That's it. They're just out there hanging out. And so that was good. And then Kirk, I have to give it to Kirk. He's been a pro, I think,
did a great job
about all of this in the last 48 hours. And, I think he entered into that press conference with the right tone. I think that he said what he needed to say.
I couldn't have done that.
No, I don't think I could have either. But I think that it was a good sign to show that Kirk is still the professional that he's always been.
I love that he said he was in Michael's corner.
Yes.
Right. And that he reached out to him. It like, again, there was a level of maturity, ownership. I'm not running from this and I'm still part of this team.
Right.
And, you can say, yeah, I'm going to do whatever it takes for us to win these next 3 games and whatnot. But like, to hear the specific examples of how he is backing up those words was very important.
Yeah.
I would have been more surprised if Kirk Cousins had not talked, given how he has been this entire season and very accountable in his mistakes and saying, I need to be better, I need to be better, I need to be better. That if he had not spoken in some capacity, I would have been shook.
Yeah.
To my core.
Yeah. And then we move it forward, and the last person we talked to on Wednesday is Michael Penix.
You can say your favorite quote from him.
My favorite quote from Michael Penix, which was the most Michael Penix of all quotes.
We can role play it because I asked the question.
Okay, you asked the question.
You ready?
Yeah.
This sounds like a simple question, but are you excited?
I am. I have a lot of feelings, but I don't know what they are, but I'm ready to play. Like that was,
and we still don't hit his tone right.
No, I can't do the tone. But the funniest thing about that,
hollow, but like you know what I mean. It's just like
he's right.
It's so mellow.
It's so mellow. It's so even keel.
Everyone was like,
chill.
Oh,
that was when he said, "I have a lot of emotion. I have a lot of feelings, but I don't know what they are." It took everything in me not to laugh because he's standing up there. I don't know if people can see this. I don't think you can see this on the
he didn't
camera.
Have shoes on.
He didn't have shoes on.
What?
He didn't.
We got a Matt Collins in the house?
No, he had socks on.
No, he had socks on. He didn't have shoes on, and he had the do-rag. And I was like, here he is, y'all. He is. And he, even in his press conference, I thought he handled himself very well for the moment. And I thought he said all the right things. There was one moment particular where I was like, he's kind of got it. He's got this understanding of where he is in the situation that he's in with every single answer that he had. But there was one moment where I think it was Maria Martin of 11 Live asked him, what's something you've learned over the course of these last few months being the back, not even few months, but since you got here about being the backup. And she didn't prompt him to talk about Kirk Cousins, but he did. And he talked for over a minute about all the things that he learned from Kirk and how thankful he was for Kirk and what Kirk has meant to him and how he said, he was like, Kirk can do no wrong in my eyes. And I think being able to see how Kirk led and how Kirk dissected things is, you hope, a good thing for Michael Penix to see in this moment, but also then him saying simultaneously, like, my goal is to be me, and my goal is to do what I know I can do.
The overall theme, I feel like, is genuine.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he walked in and he was like, yeah, this is the first press conference as a starting quarterback in the NFL. What am I going to do? Walking in without shoes on, in my socks. I'm never going to raise my voice above just a kind of a quiet, steady talking tone. And he's answering the questions the way he would answer it. And it does lend a sense of confidence, I think. If I'm a player in the locker room, I want somebody who's unflappable, who's never going to be too high, too low. Like, that is, I believe, an essential quality to an NFL starting quarterback.
Yeah.
A sweet moment that came out today was Jesse Bates was talking about Michael Penix Jr. being named the starter, and their lockers are next to each other. And he said when they both came in yesterday, they just gave each other a smirk. And that was kind of it. Like, Michael, as we have said multiple times now, very level-headed, doesn't get too high, too low. And so the fact that they just exchanged this simple moment of like a smirk, and Jesse joked, he's like, that's probably the most I'll get out of him. But
no,
like,
that's what's so funny is everybody talking about.
He is excited.
Yeah, in his own way.
But he's not going to be like QB1 plastered everywhere. Like, he's not going to have balloons around his locker, which is very dramatic, I know. But like, you know what I mean? Like, he's not going to do any of this hoopla.
Well, every single person was asked, what was your like conversation with Michael like? What was,
everyone's
how did he take the news? And every single person said the same thing, is like, he got excited about as excited as Michael Penix can get. Like, he smiled a little, I think, was like Zach Robinson's quote was like, I was on the phone with him and I think he smiled, but unsure. So we've been on this. Yeah. But
to learn more about Michael Penix Jr., go watch the Falcons in Focus episode.
Yeah. Terrin and I sat down with him pretty soon after he was drafted here. And it was, he's just a very thoughtful individual.
Let him tell his story.
Also amazing coverage by y'all on AtlantaFalcons.com, so go check that out. But yeah, we talked a lot about Michael Penix, the person. Tori, what do you think we're going to see on Sunday?
Yeah, so I do think that, okay, this is not a cop-out because I do think we need to talk about Michael Penix, but I think the key matchup here is the Falcons run game versus the Giants, the Giants run defense. And I say this because the Giants run defense, according to what stat you look at, is one of the worst run defenses in the league. The Falcons offense, as a run first, honestly, team the last couple of weeks has been doing some really good things. Yep. And I think there's this saying, and I even asked Zach Robinson about it. It's like, there's this saying that the best friend of a rookie quarterback is a dominant run game.
Ask Matt Ryan in 2008.
There you go. And I feel as though because of what Bijan, Tyler, the entire O-line, Charlie Warner has done recently in the run game and how confident they feel like they are in running the ball, that bodes well for the amount of balance that you can strike. And for me, it's more about how Michael Penix works out of it. Like how he works beyond the success that you would assume the Falcons to have running the football. When he gets his chances, what does he do with it? And how do they use the run game to kind of settle him into the game? Like, that's something that I am really looking forward to seeing develop, and also just how he operates the offense. That's a big part in and of
out
itself.
Of huddles.
Yeah, like
2-minute drill if they have to be in it. Yep.
Exactly. Like, how does he operate? How does play calling evolve? And how does he kind of keep plays alive? Because that's the one thing that everyone this week has been harping on is the fact that Michael Penix is an athletic guy. He's not a dual threat quarterback, but he is an athletic guy.
To that point, I love what you said about the running game, and I want to yes and that is I think that it will not only benefit Michael Penix, but I think Michael Penix is going to benefit the run game. And I would not be shocked. I don't know anything. This is me speculating as just a ball knower. I would not be surprised at all if we see a little bit of read option in this, because I do think you're going to see most college quarterbacks nowadays, right? There's not a ton of pro style under center things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of pistol, which we've seen already a lot this season with Kirk Cousins. I wouldn't be shocked if they stay in shotgun for a lot of this game. So having Bijan, Tyler next to him gives you an element of that read option game if they do choose to use Michael Penix's legs. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he has to turn into Cam Newton and keep the ball and run downfield. They could also tag some play action passes off 100%. Of that, things like that. So there are going to be just some new wrinkles and elements to this offense that just virtually like weren't possible with Kirk Cousins back there. And that is what I'm so excited to see, is just the run game was already hard enough to stop. When you add in things that just aren't on film yet for defenses, and when you look across at the defensive line, you got Brian Burns. A great way to slow down a star pass rusher is to make him have to think. Is to put him in some conflict. And so I would fully expect to see Michael Penix be a little bit of a part of the run game.
Terrin, I'm curious, we've made a lot this week about how quickly Michael Penix has to connect with these receivers who, let's be honest, he has not taken very many reps with at all. None in like live action. So for you, as you're kind of looking at this offense and what it could be for the Falcons this Sunday, if you're Michael Penix, who is your go-to guy?
Ooh.
Charlie Warner.
I wish. That would be so fun.
We're Charlie Warner.
I think I'm going to agree with you from the previous episode with Drake London. Just because he is such an easy target where he wins any jump ball, and like the guy is super tall too and can get up and grab. And I think, I don't know, Darnell Mooney just had such a connection with Kirk Cousins that maybe, I don't think he's not going to have a connection with.
No, but it's like you're cheating on him a little bit. I just feel gross. You're like, no, they're also both lefties, Drake and Michael Penix. So, lefty-lefty connection.
Yeah, and also Darnell Mooney, I think, is still coming back from whatever injury or qualm he was going through, because he only had one reception last week.
Yeah, but I think that was more.
Because he's been on the injury report, but it's been for the last week, like the not injury related rest thing. Yeah. So
I think it's more just like rest. I'll add a note to yours. I actually think a sleeper in this game and a sleeper connection is with Ray McLeod.
I love that.
They did work together in the preseason.
Yeah. So Amna Sapon, and that was what I was going to say, is she was talking to Ray in the locker room on Wednesday and just kind of asking about Michael becoming the quarterback. And Ray told her, he was like, we're from Tampa. We're from the Tampa area. And we actually went out and played some catch together and ran some routes on air and worked out together a little bit during the offseason this year. And I think that even if it was only a couple of days that they did that, I think that's invaluable for, one, Michael having someone who he has at least a little bit of a connection to that spans longer than the last 2 days of practice. So I'm going to say a sleeper pick in this that, I'm curious to see that connection is Ray and Michael Penix.
Yeah.
So let's move forward a little bit.
Before we get off of Michael Penix, though, I just have a surprise for you guys. So I created a list here because Tori was kind enough to create the podcast rundown. It gave me a little bit of free time. So I was curious. I just wanted to see what the best Falcons debuts were as a starter after week one of their rookie season, right? Because it's one thing to just be Matt Ryan and then start. That's expected.
Yeah, throw a touchdown on your first.
Yeah, that was pretty great.
Your first pass.
So I created my list of top 5 Falcons who made their starting debut after week one of their rookie season.
Okay.
But also within the first 2 years, because that list needed a little padding.
Right.
So number 1 on that list, Devontae Freeman. He made that start in the 3rd week of his 2nd season.
Yeah.
Because Tevin Coleman got hurt.
Yeah,
and Tevin actually entered that year as the starter. He had 141 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, 5 catches for 52 yards, 193 total yards. That's crazy as a debut. So that was my number 1. Number 2 is wide receiver Stacey Bailey, who in week 5 of the 1983 season caught 7 passes for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. 3rd on my list is a guy that we all know personally, and that is Dave Archer.
Yeah, Dave!
As an undrafted free agent in 1984, he backed up that whole season, and then in week 6 of the 1985 season, he entered the game and was starter for the rest of the way. He had 209 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception, we can forget about that, and 18 rushing yards. Look at that, the mobility of Arch.
Wow, I'm so glad Arch made this list.
Number 4 is somebody who is a current Falcon, and that is Drake London, who actually didn't start week 1 of his rookie season. which is...
But it was the package that they were in.
Right.
Like,
it's
that's the thing is, like, I know people are always like, ooh, so-and-so didn't start. And it's like, they've had a look that they wanted to.
Yeah.
I'm not.
That was a wrinkle of the Arthur Smith, offense,
yes,
right?
Yes, yeah.
There's nuances to stats.
you gotta earn that, rookie. So he had 8 catches, 86 yards, a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion. And then number 5 on this list, any guesses? Bubba Bean.
Here's the thing. I was about to be like, what era are we talking about? Like, who? So tell us about Bubba.
Would you have guessed Bubba Bean?
No, I would not have.
Okay.
There's not a chance I would have guessed Bubba
There we
Bean.
go. So he was a running back in week 2 of the 1976 season. He was the number 9 overall pick that year. So another really highly drafted rookie. 98 rushing yards and a touchdown.
Wow.
So those are the top 5 Falcons rookie debuts not to come in their first game of the rookie season.
That was my favorite surprise of yours. I got a little nervy because normally it's like a trivia about, say, Duluth.
Yeah.
Trivia about Duluth. Yeah.
Hey, don't disparage my Duluth trivia. I worked very hard on that. We're coming for you, Duluth, Minnesota.
Will has a personal vendetta out against Duluth, Minnesota.
I don't want to have to scroll down when I Google.
Yeah. Okay.
That was a good one.
Yeah. No.
Good surprise.
Will,
I'm okay with that surprise.
Thank you so much for your contribution to the podcast. That was a lot of fun. I hope everybody at home enjoyed that list. We're gonna have to give it to Arch. I'm sure he'll love to see that.
Yeah.
You'll
it's
have
gonna
to
be fun.
Email it to him. All right, but let's get back to the game. Let's get back to the plot at hand.
There you go.
When it comes to key matchups and what the keys to the game are for this Sunday, I know we've talked about the run game. We haven't really talked a lot about the Falcons' defense. So for you guys, what are the key matchups of this game?
Terrin, you want to go first?
Well, so the Giants announced this week that Drew Lock is going to be their quarterback. And they have had a carousel, more so than any other team this season at the quarterback position.
Tommy Cutlets.
Oh, boy. Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, and Tim Boyle all made appearances and whatnot. And so I looked at, since Lock is the guy this week, his numbers. He's appeared in 4 games, but only 2 in which that he's played the entire time. And he's 0-2 for those, which shouldn't be surprising given the Giants record.
Right.
Not to throw astray. But I also didn't want Drew Lock to take all the blame. And so, but he threw for 227 yards and 178 yards in each of those, with an interception in each of them. No touchdowns, passing at least. He did run for 1. So talking to Jesse Bates today, it was like, how do you prepare for a team that has 4 different quarterbacks on their film, like throughout the entire season? And they're just kind of beep-bopping around.
Fair.
And it goes back to, which I know he says this anytime, that there's a quarterback difference. Like just looking at the offense, looking at the plays that they run. Whoever's throwing it doesn't necessarily matter when you focus on the throws and the routes and the schemes and et cetera, like the plays themselves. The bodies can just be X's.
Right. Well, I think that's such a good point, too. And it goes, honestly, back to the conversation that we've had about like Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins and the replacement of Kirk Cousins at that position. Zach Robinson even said, yeah, there's going to be different wrinkles, but it's going to look very similar to what you've already seen from this group and this unit. And I think from Jesse's point of view as a safety and the way you have to break down the game, it does. It is more of like, what does the offensive coordinator rely on more than what the players themselves are pursuing?
Yeah.
It's so interesting sometimes, though, because you do have certain quarterbacks that change it a bit. Because like,
yeah, because they have
Drew Lock is, he can throw the ball like all over the yard. When he was at Missouri, I mean,
Mizzou Mafia.
He was awesome. I had him.
Mizzou Mafia.
Have you guys ever played college fantasy football? We did this when I was with the AJC. We just had he was my quarterback in that fantasy football league.
Oh, you were living.
He won me the league. So I have forever a soft spot in my heart
indebted to
for
Drew
Lock. I totally am. So thank you, Drew Lock. I hope you have a bad game on Sunday. But what's your key matchup of the game, Will? You can look at a couple of his weapons, right? Tyrone Tracy and Malik Neighbors for sure are going to be important guys for the Falcons to keep an eye on. But I'm going to go right back to Brian Burns, and I think Caleb McGarry. You and I are in agreement. We've spoken about this. I don't know how you feel, Terrin, but you can let me know. I think Caleb McGarry has had a pretty good year this year.
He gets a lot of heat because of previous years of play, which I do understand.
It's like residual,
like I don't trust, I don't know, but I've enjoyed watching him this year in certain points in time in the game. So
week 1 was tough against TJ Watt, but like
you knew it was going to be.
Who hasn't had a bad game against TJ Watt?
I haven't.
However, God, you're such a lockdown right tackle. You're my favorite. So saying all of that about Caleb playing well this year, I do think this is a tough matchup for him on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Burns is a speed rusher. Mm-hmm. He can bend the edge. It's really going to strain, I think, Caleb's ability to both get wide and deep at the same time and really kind of create that arc for Michael Penix. And on top of that, we mentioned Michael Penix is a lefty. So now that is his blind side.
Correct. They're not switching sides.
They are not switching sides.
The tackles are not switching sides.
As much as some would like for that to happen. No.
That's not happening. Caleb McGarry will be on his blind side.
So Caleb is going to have a good game. And of course, it's not going to be him by himself. Right. They will figure out ways to give him some assistance. Mm-hmm. But that is the one thing when you look at, on paper, Atlanta comes into this game as the better team. Mm-hmm. But a great pass rusher sometimes can level the playing field.
Right. And to your point about getting deep and just kind of the speed off the edge, that's kind of been the thorn in Caleb McGarry's side when you look at this year is sometimes if these guys are taking a certain angle, there's just little he can do to get back.
He wants to be going forward.
Right.
And I don't think he's comfortable going backwards.
Right. And I think that Charlie Warner kind of folding over to that side is going to be pretty important. Yep. What Bijan Robinson continues to do in pass blocking and pass protection. These are all little wrinkles that are going to play an important part in trying to limit what Brian Burns can do against Caleb McGarry. But let's keep this thing rolling and moving. Will's favorite question to kind of round out the podcast. What is one thing the Falcons need to do on Sunday to get a win? Terrin, I started with you, and I'm going to start with you again. Sorry. I was going to say, I'll start with you and go to Will, but no, we're just going to you.
Still going to start with me?
We're going to start with Terrin.
Protect Michael Penix Jr. so he has the opportunity to play freely without being pressured. I think it goes back to the matchup and whatnot that you were just talking about, but also give him the opportunities to show what he can do. I do believe run the ball to let that open it up because once it's open, let the man play.
Yeah, I think what's interesting too is going back and watching a lot of his Washington tape. He had a lot of clean pockets. I think something that is
He's very
lost.
good in the pocket.
Yeah, something that's lost in the sauce of that Washington team, because everybody will talk about Rome and Michael Penix and the receivers and all that. But Michael Penix was kept clean and he didn't really take a lot of sacks. Now, I think that's twofold. That's one, that offensive line held up their end of the bargain. But to your point, Will, Michael Penix was pretty dang good when he had time in the pocket. And I to your point, Terrin, protecting him, and if it's hard to get after him and it's hard to move him off his spot, that bodes well for the Falcons and what they hope that Michael Penix can do. So, Will, what's one thing the Falcons need to do on Sunday to get a win?
Yeah, I think that they need to hit 5 explosive plays on offense. And we've talked a lot about the red zone efficiency. We've talked a lot about third down, things like that. But I kind of think an underrated aspect of this offense that has been missing in recent weeks is that explosive element that we really saw come to life over the first 6-7 games of the season. And
the Tampa game at Tampa alone.
Yeah. It was the first touchdown, Kyle Pitts on that corner route, which we haven't seen that since then. Right. I think we saw that several times early in the year, that kind of bunch set with Kyle on that outside. And just running that corner against a single safety.
Season.
It feels like the first half and the second half, just
very
night
different.
And day. Yeah. And I would love to see that element come back into this offense. And I think, when Michael Penix was out there against Denver, what do you do on his second pass play? I'm going for Casey Washington down the left sideline, and it was a dot. He dropped that right in there. It's unfortunate, Casey gets injured on that play and ultimately loses possession. But that is something that I think will be brought back into this offense. And if they can connect on those, your chance of scoring on a drive with an explosive goes up a huge amount. Yeah. So I think that's key for them on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think it goes to, we talked a lot about red zone efficiency and the fact that the Falcons never even made it to the red zone against the Raiders. If you're scoring points, if you're scoring touchdowns without even making it to the red zone, if you're 0 for 0 in the red zone, but you have scored 3 touchdowns, you'll never hear a peep out of me.
If you're hitting threes, you don't have to drive to the hoop.
No.
Right. It's like the time of possession battle conversation we had at the very beginning, where it's they're losing this one. But who cares if they're winning?
They're scoring points. And nothing matters unless you're scoring points or withholding points.
Right.
So that's our spiel for the day. This has been the longest freaking week, you guys, from Monday Night Football into a quarterback change, normal, regular, everyday prep for the game itself. Everybody, you can always check us out at AtlantaFalcons.com. Thanks for spending some time with us on this Friday or Saturday or whenever you're listening. Make sure and check out the Atlanta Falcons Podcast Network on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you can get your podcast. This has been the Falcons Final Whistle Podcast brought to you by Zaxby's. For Will and Terrin, I'm Tori. We will see you guys next time.
Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's.